Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Wednesday, June 9th, and we're breaking down this 12-game main slate that we have over on DraftKings today. And it's a bit of an oddball slate, in my opinion. Like, there's a lot of games, so typically you think there'd be a lot of great options, but I'm not really finding that to be the case. I was kind of having some trouble finding a lot of pitchers I like and a lot of bats, because everything is kind of right in the middle, kind of meh for the most part. But as we sift through the slate, I think we can find some diamonds in the rough. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me over on social media if you feel like you want to do that. Handles in the bottom right corner of your screen. And if you want some extra content besides the few players I do have listed here on the spreadsheet, link is down below for that, for the projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, and all that fun stuff. Link is down below. I do update it throughout the day in my Discord chat, but I think that's it for the plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitchers and move on to the bats. And unlike yesterday's slate, where there's like 100 good pitchers that you could talk about, I only found 3 that I like quite a bit. I was a little bit tempted to have Chris Flexen on here versus Detroit, but I just quite couldn't pull the trigger considering the guy's got like a 15% K rate this season. But I think you could add him to the short list as well. But I do have 3 options here that I think are very viable, and this is one of those slates where I think you could double spend down for a pitcher. I don't think we've had one of those yet this season, but there's definitely a good opportunity for it today. Now, we do have Garrett Cole here. He's your ace of the slate, $11,200, one of the better pitchers in baseball, but I do have concerns here on the road in Minnesota because there are some decent bats in that lineup that do have some power, and I'm kind of concerned about baseball kind of cracking down on the pitchers using substance, increased spin rate and things like that, because we know Garrett Cole is one of the main culprits of that. And as soon as they announced that his first game, I mean, coincident or not, spin rate was down a little bit, and he gave up 5 runs in that game versus the Tampa Bay Rays. So I think we gotta be a little bit careful here, because if that's something they're really gonna crack down on, Garrett Cole's obviously a guy that uses that quite a bit. And I mean, it's a lot of money to spend for a guy that might not be what we've expected from the past couple of seasons out of him. So I think we got to be a little bit careful here with Garrett Cole. But if you're just looking at the overall numbers this season, obviously nothing to really complain about too much. I mean, around 100 pitches per game, 2.2 ERA, 2.34 xFIP, 36.5% K rate, not really walking many guys, and typically doesn't give up too much power, less than a homer per 9, only 108 ISO given up this season, 33% hard contact rate. In the past, he's always been good for maybe a homer or 2 from a lefty, but I mean, so far this season, that really hasn't been much of the case. I mean, about a homer per 9 and 32% hard contact rate, but that's nothing to really run from the hills from whatsoever. Plus, it comes with a nice 42% K rate. So the only reason you're fading Garrett Cole here is if you want to double spin down for a pitcher, because I think it's very viable today. Both these guys are in very, very good spots, and these guys are just underpriced in my opinion. I think they could be a lot more expensive than what they are. I think Casey Mize should probably be around the 8K range versus Seattle, and Austin Gomber, he's priced like he's trash every single time he's starting. That's just simply not the case. So I definitely think it's a really good day if you want to double spin out for pitcher and go really expensive with your bats. That is certainly a pretty good way to go, in my opinion. So anyway, getting away from Garrett Cole here, we'll talk about these 2 spend down pitchers. We have Casey Mize here, $6,800, and he's been okay this year. It's obviously not like super impressive at a 20.4% K rate, 7% walk rate, and a 4.19 xFIP. He's getting a little bit lucky considering his xFIP and Sierra close to a run higher than his ERA. But when you can give me a matchup versus Seattle with a pitcher with Casey Mize's upside, I mean, the guy's a former #1 overall pick, and he's still young, so obviously he's still learning. And I typically will use any pitcher versus Seattle, and Mize hasn't been bad this year. He's definitely had some decent games, and so far this season, Seattle, they're on a 26% K rate to righties, 158 ISO, 88 WRC plus, and on base percentage below 290 here. So this is a really good spot for Casey Mize. And again, if you're not spending up for Garrett Cole, you want to just use these 2 guys and go around $13,000 for your pitching, I think it can work out. It may not look great, but I definitely think it's a decent way to go. And Austin Gomber here, $6,000. Again, not a bad pitcher. Like, he is, every single time he pitches, he is priced as bottom of the barrel, like he's an absolute gas can out there, which is really not the case. Is he going to go like super deep into games and throw 100 pitches? Probably not, but if he's pitching well, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he could go pretty deep into the game. And he's got a 3.81 xFIP, 3.98 Sierra, which is not elite, but he doesn't have to be elite at $6,000. Also, a major park boost going from Coors Field to Miami here, one of the better pitchers park out there. So, I mean, that's another positive here for Austin Gomber, but over a 25% K rate this season. The walks can be a bit of an issue, but nothing I'm overly concerned about for a guy that's only $6,000. And You're looking at these splits for Miami this season versus lefties. Pretty mediocre for the most part. They are striking out quite a bit, 28% K rate, 151 ISO, OBP below 300, 88 WRC plus. A little bit weaker overall to righties, but Austin Gomber should be fine. I like that he's pitching in Miami, and for $6,000, have to imagine he's going to end up being pretty popular here, so I do like him quite a bit. And like I was saying, guys, if you want to use Garrett Cole and pair him with one of these cheaper pitchers, that is certainly fine. Like, even if you're not like totally sold on Garrett Cole here and you are worried about the substance thing where, MLB is cracking down on that, I totally understand that. But I mean, you don't have, there's not like a ton of really good spend up bats in the slate. So even if you do use Garrett Cole, you're not really sacrificing too much. So goal plus Mize, goal plus Gomber, or if you want to go Mize plus Gomber, if you play 3 max, you can kind of do that scenario where you're just getting exposure to 2 out of those 3 guys every single lineup and have even split on exposure. I think that might make some sense. So a couple ways we could go here, and there's a couple of other pitchers you could kind of mix in on the slate. Taijuan Walker looks decently interesting. Chris Flexen, if you're just a believer in rostering pitchers versus Detroit, that is certainly an option, although that did not work yesterday where Detroit actually had a pretty decent game. So just some things to keep in mind, but these are the 3 that I have some interest in as of right now. So that being said, let's move right over to the bats. As always, we'll start with the catcher position. And up top, we have JT Realmuto, $5,000, one of the best hitting catchers in baseball. He went deep last night. And the Philadelphia Phillies get another matchup here versus a lefty. Yesterday they faced Drew Smyly, who they didn't do it. I know JT Realmuto and Bryce Harper went deep, but I was really in on Rhys Hoskins. Ended up giving me a goose egg. I cannot believe it. I thought he was one of the best plays in the entire slate, but that's baseball sometimes. They can be in a great spot, and they do absolutely nothing. But Tucker Davidson has not been bad. He's made 2 starts this year. He's a new pitcher, so we only have 11.2 inning sample size, but hasn't been bad for him. He's walking guys, 13% K rate, 21% K rate, or 13% walk rate, I should say, 21% K rate, but he has not been bad. 0.69 ISO, 2.31 ERA. The xFIP and Sierra around 2.5 runs higher. So I guess it's a super small sample size, so I hate to put anything into perspective here, but he is due to get beat up a little bit. I mean, it's super small sample size, so I hate to put anything into it. I don't think Tucker Davidson's going to be terrible, but I definitely prefer the right-handed power bats here for the Phillies. I think you could also play a guy like Bryce Harper as well in full stack. So you can sign me up for the Phillies. Team total close to 5 here. They're not my favorite stack on the slate, but I do think the righties do grade out pretty well, and JT Realmuto does crush left-handed pitching. Will Smith, $4,700, and again, one of the better hitting catchers in baseball. And I like the Dodgers quite a bit today. They're one of the best stacks in the entire slate. I think their team total is only below Boston right now, and they're facing Jake Odorizzi, and they're playing in Fenway Park. Dodgers playing in Pittsburgh, obviously not a hitter's park or anything, but still one of the better offenses in baseball. Going up against Tyler Anderson, who I don't think is an awful pitcher, but I'm definitely giving the advantage here to the Dodgers. Prefer the righties here versus the lefty, and I'll take the team total above 5 here. And while Will Smith hasn't been exactly great this season, it's not terrible for a catcher. Again, most catchers don't usually have the best numbers out there. 270 batting average, ISO around 180, which isn't terrible again for a catcher. 17% K rate, 11% walk rate. So Will Smith, if you're just stacking up the Dodgers, I think obviously makes sense in full stacks, but not sure how to get there in cash games at his price point. Then Omar Narvaez, $4,000. The Brewers lefties are one of the better plays on the entire slate. They're playing in Great American Small Park. They're already playing a good hitter's park in Milwaukee, but obviously playing in Cincinnati is going to be a boost for pretty much anybody, and it will be here for Milwaukee. And the lefties grade out pretty well for me versus Gutierrez here. I believe that's how I'm pronouncing his name correctly. They have a team total close to 5 here, 4.86 currently, and Omar Narvaez has been pretty solid this year. 317 batting average, well close to 400. ISO really close to 200, 400 on base percentage. Not really striking out a ton, walking at a decent rate, and only has a 29% ground ball rate, so he's getting the ball in the air. So I think Narvaez is a very strong play catcher, and obviously you can play a cheaper catcher if you want to completely punt the position. That is always fine. And looking at the numbers for Gutierrez, it's only a 10 inning sample size, so it's kind of like on the lines with Tucker Davidson here, where we don't really have much to base off anything. And it's kind of similar to Davidson, where he's got a good ERA, but the xFIP and Sierra are a couple runs higher. Doesn't really have a high strikeout rate. 12.5% walk rate. Again, super small sample size, so it's really hard to look too deep into the numbers there. But I'm going to definitely have more interest in the Milwaukee Brewers lefties here than I will in playing Gutierrez in this matchup. Then dropping out of first base, we have Big Meat Pete here, $5,800. The Mets are once again super expensive. They get the dream matchup versus Matt Harvey. Only went 3 innings in his last start, so we can't expect him to go too deep into this game, which is probably a good thing for himself, because once he gets like 2 or 3 times in the order, things can get pretty rough for Matt Harvey. And he had a decent start to the season, but he's definitely fell off quite a bit. It wasn't terrible in his last start, but I mean, I would definitely rather pick on Matt Harvey than actually roster him for DFS purposes. But again, the Mets are going to be really hard to stack. Now, if you go the double spend down pitcher route, it's certainly viable to stack the Mets. But overall, this is a very expensive team. Pete Alonso is expensive. Francisco Lindor is not overly expensive, but he is still pretty pricey. Jonathan Villar is expensive. Dominic Smith's above $5,000. A lot of these guys have been terrible all season, so it feels a really gross stack in the Mets. Like, James McCann's still above $5,000, I believe. He might be upper 4Ks, upper 4K range. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure he's like $5,100. So not easy to stack the Mets, but if you do go the double spin down pitcher route, it is certainly possible. Pete Alonso, we know he's got plenty of power, facing a pitcher that gives up plenty of power. If you got the money for him, sure, why not? Go for it. Rhys Hoskins, $4,700. He sucked last night. I'm willing to go back to the well here, facing a lefty, because we know he's got great power versus them, and overall this season, he's got a nice 230 ISO with, I believe, 12 home runs this season. So if you want to go back to the well after he killed you last night, I don't mind it. I'm willing to do so, because you have to have a short memory in DFS, especially in baseball. Because, I mean, the guy can go over 5 or 4 strikeouts one night, and the next night he can go 2 or 3 homers quite easily. Then Albert Pujols, $3,100, hitting clean up here for the Dodgers, at least projected to, and at $3,100 facing a lefty. I know the numbers suck batting average wise, but he does have over a 200 ISO this season. So if you're just looking for some cheap power and what is quite potentially the best stack in the entire slate, don't hate Pujols here, even though it doesn't feel great rostering the old man. Dropping on a second base, we have his teammate Chris Taylor, who could potentially be hitting right beside him. $4,600. Always like his numbers here versus lefties. Overall this season, batting .275, WOBA .377. ISO close to 200, WRC plus close to 150 with an on-base percentage of .394. So at only $4,600, he's also eligible in the outfield. I could see him being pretty popular on the slate. Also went deep last night. Gene Segura, $3,900, pretty good price tag for him going up against a lefty. He had a decent game last night. He has a really good batting average this season. He doesn't really have much power so far, but he is batting .321. I'm not sure that's updated from yesterday, which I know he had a couple hits, so that might be even higher, but like Segura at that price point versus a lefty. And while I'm not really trying to pick on Davidson too much, I still think these Phillies righties are some of the better plays on the entire slate. And then I have Rougned Odor here just because I didn't like any other second baseman. He gets a nice lefty on righty matchup, and we know he's got some okay pop versus righties, but I don't really feel confident rostering Rougned Odor. I'm not overly interested in the Yankees here. I think you can play guys like Gleyber Torres, Gio Urshela, Odor, LeMahieu. I'm not sure if I said Stan yet or not, or Judge, but they're okay. I don't love the Yankees. Their team total is nothing great at 4.56, and a lot of those guys are a little bit expensive, but Odor's not bad. Should be hitting close to the middle of the order here. I would really try not to go this route, but if you have to, I don't think it's the worst thing you can do. Rafael Devers, $5,900, very expensive, but we know he crushes right-handed pitching. Odorizzi just faced Boston, didn't really go well for him, and right now they have the highest implied team total in the slate. Now, I would not be surprised if the Dodgers switch with the Red Sox tomorrow. I feel like their team total should be a little bit higher than the Red Sox, but I do like them here. They're playing in Fenway. It's a hitter-friendly park. Astros popped off yesterday. Maybe it's the Boston Red Sox turn to pop off here, but I do like the spot here versus Odorizzi. Looking at Odorizzi's splits this season, or I guess we look at his overall numbers. He has a 7.1 ERA. Now, obviously, he's not pitching as bad as that numbers would suggest. It's a small sample size, though, as well, 16 innings, but 4.5 xFIP, 4.4 SIERA, 23% K rate, and around a double-digit walk rate. Is giving up a 251 ISO so far this season with a near 265 batting average. So I'd say pretty mediocre for the most part. I don't think Odorizzi sucks, but versus Boston, I'm going to give the advantage here, especially to the lefties. I like the lefties here. You can play the righties. You can play guys like Vasquez, JD Martinez, Kike Hernandez. I'd probably more so in tournaments, but I think the lefties do make sense in cash games today. Justin Turner, $4,900. We know he's always been good versus lefties, and I like all the Dodgers, so he's in play just because of that. Maybe more so a tournament play, but depending on where your roster construction looks like, I think Justin Turner could end up being a decent cash play if you happen to spend down at other positions. Then Travis Shaw, $3,100. Like the lefties here versus Gutierrez. I think the Brewers make sense as one of the better stacks on the entire slate. Travis Shaw's numbers suck this season. He's got just enough pop in his bat versus lefties to be viable at a dirt cheap price point and a great hitter's park. Dropping on a shortstop, we have Xander Bogaerts, $5,800. Shortstop, outside of Frankie Lindor, not loving it. I think Lindor ends up being pretty chalky in the slate, which Sounds kind of gross, to be honest, as bad as he's been this year. But I mean, nearly $6,000 for Bogarts is a bit much. I know he's been very good this season, but just it's a little tough to swallow there. And J.P. Crawford, I think might will end up being pretty popular, so I'm not sure a lot of people are going to want to stack against, or not really stack, but target against their own pitcher. So we'll see how shortstop goes, because I know no one's playing Matt Harvey, so I just feel like Lindor is going to be that guy everyone kind of leans to, and he was kind of chalky last night. But Xander Bogaerts, he's been great this season, like Boston. Kind of forgot to mention him when I was talking about the righties, but with shortstop being kind of a weird position, I could see him being decently popular. Frankie Lindor, just mentioned this. He has been awful this year, like absolutely awful. I mean, he gets booed at the best stadium sometimes, kind of crazy. But facing Matt Harvey, you can sign me up for all the Mets. Team total close to 5 here. I just hate their price points, especially as bad as they've been this year. But nothing like facing Matt Harvey and Camden Yards, getting those guaranteed ninth inning at bats to fix things up on offense. Then J.P. Crawford, $3,200. He has been on fire. Not a guy we're going to play for power, but he's been getting plenty of hits. He's got a little bit of speed as well. If you're going to use anybody versus Casey Mize, I'd prefer it to be the lefties. In the past, he was terrible versus them. Not as much the case this season, but I mean, at that price point, J.P. Crawford, if you're not using Mize, like if you're going the Garrett Cole and the Austin Gomber route, I could see J.P. Crawford definitely making sense in your lineup. And then going down to the outfield, we have a laundry list of good plays here. Shohei Ohtani up top, $1,500 home against Brad Keller. I'm not in love with the Angels here, but Brad Keller is a pretty middle-of-the-run pitcher for the most part, and Shohei Ohtani's been one of the best players in baseball this year. I think he just went deep last night. One of the league leaders in homers, tons of power so far this season, just super expensive. I remember the days when he was like in the low 4K range. That did not last long. I said he's going to be in the 6K range soon, and we are very close to it. Now $5,900, and we're not surprised if he gets the 6K at some point with his 330 ISO this season. So he's mainly just, if you can afford him, you can play him. If not, I don't think it's going to be a big deal in this slate. Christian Yelich, $5,300. If you're going to play one Milwaukee Brewer lefty on the slate, I would prefer it to be Yelich. I know he's a little bit expensive, but this is definitely one of the better home run calls on the entire slate, playing Great American Small Park. Mookie Betts, $5,000. I could see him being the popular, expensive outfielder today. Just a little bit cheap, in my opinion. I know the numbers haven't exactly been like MVP level Mookie Betts this season, but I'm loving the Dodgers. I think a lot of people are going to like the Dodgers. $5,000 righty and lefty matchup, although I do prefer righty. I prefer Mookie Betts versus righties, since the numbers we've seen from him in the past couple of seasons have actually been kind of slacking versus lefties. But looking at his numbers this season, hasn't really been the case too much. I mean, he's been okay. 260 batting average, 185 ISO, and near 400 base percentage. Not as bad as it was last season, where he's like one of the worst players in baseball versus lefties. But love Mookie here. A fine cash game target. Nick Castellanos, $4,500. I hate rostering bats against Brett Anderson because he's kind of annoying because he's a big ground ball pitcher, but we can certainly use righties versus him. And Castellanos has been very good this season. 359 batting average, 443 WOBA, 268 ISO, 181 WRC plus, over 1,000 OPS. And the numbers specifically versus lefties get even a little bit better. It's a smaller sample size, but we know over the course of his career, he's been great versus left-handed pitching. This season, over a 200 ISO, 425 on base percentage, or I'm sorry, a 200 WRC plus, and a 333 ISO with a near 500 WOBA and over a 400 batting average. So, like Castellanos quite a bit, like the park that he's in. It's kind of annoying to roster guys against Brett Anderson, but if you're going to roster one guy, Nick Castellanos is the guy I like to target the most on the slate. Not overly expensive as well. Yordan Alvarez, $4,000. He went deep last night. Now he gets a righty on the mound. If you're stacking the Astros, I don't think we've talked about any Astros so far. I think they're a decent stack. It's just Nathan Eovaldi is a pitcher where he's not one I really stack against. I think he's fine. He's not an elite level pitcher, but he's good. Like, he can throw the ball fast, throw the ball hard. He doesn't suck. He's not great, but he doesn't suck, so he's kind of an annoying guy to stack against, and that's something I've really ever done. And so for the season, Alvarez is betting around 300 with over a 200 ISO, so I mean, he's a fine play. I'm not like over the moon about Yordan Alvarez, but I like the price point. Alex Verdugo, $3,900 against Odorizzi. I could see him being a very popular cash play, because considering Boston's got the highest team total on the slate, he's facing a righty, betting close to 300 this season with some decent pop at the top of the order. I do like him quite a bit in cash games or even tournaments today. Michael Brantley, $3,700. Similar play to Alvarez, just does not have quite the power, but we know he's a high contact guy that can get on base. Left and righty matchup versus Eovaldi, and a hitter from the park in Fenway. Denny Santana, $3,200. So they typically have Christian Arroyo lead off versus lefties, but with a righty on the mound, we've seen Denny Santana lead off. And if that's the case again today, Santana, $3,200 with the team that currently has the highest implied team total on the slate. Could see him being a very popular cash game play, also eligible at first base, which should boost ownership. Then AJ Pollock, $3,100. Should hit around the middle of the order here versus a lefty and Tyler Anderson. And I've always liked AJ Pollock versus lefties. I realize it's not been the greatest thing this season, but he's dirt cheap. I think the last time AJ Pollock was on the slate, wasn't he like $2,100? So he's up $1,000. I'm not sure what happened there. But like him versus lefties, and if you're just stacking up the Dodgers, he's a good way to get cheap exposure to them. But with that being said, guys, I think that's going to be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check out the Patreon down below if you want some extra content. Follow me over on social media using the handles in the bottom right corner of your screen. But I think it's going to be pretty much it. I will stop rambling. I got to go to bed. It's like 2:30 a.m., so I apologize if I slurred some words. I am very tired, but I want to get this video up so I can get up earlier in the day. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the weather wherever you are if it's nice, and I'll see you in the next one.